If you want to get bigger, you've got to get stronger. Period. It's no secret that progressive overload is the most important factor in any training program when the goal is muscle size. The problem becomes, however, that when I or any other coach say you've got to get stronger, most people assume that it means to lift heavier, but it doesn't. Progression is not about adding 5 pounds to the bar, it's about getting better. As long as you're getting better, chances are you're getting bigger. Although the main goal is in fact to add more weight to the bar, there will come a time in your training where you'll feel as if you've been stuck using the same weight for the last 12 months. When that happens and you feel as if you're not progressing enough to grow, start focusing a bit more on the following progression techniques. Not only will this ensure that you're getting better, but all of these strategies will help when it comes down to adding weight to the bar later. Number 1. More reps. Other than slapping another 5 lb plate onto the bar, increasing the number of reps you perform is the simplest and most effective method of progression. If you pushed 185 pounds for 10 reps during your last bench press session, and this week you managed to push it for 12 reps, congrats, you've gotten stronger. 185 pounds by 10 equals 1,850 pounds of total volume. 185 pounds times 12 equals 2,220 pounds of total volume. Adding reps, however, has its limitations. This is due to intensity or the amount of physical power that the body uses when performing an activity. What this means is simple. Despite an increase in total volume, if the weight is not challenging enough, there will be a point of diminishing returns. According to a study published in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research, you would have to perform 3 times the total volume when using a lighter weight to get the same exact results you would from a moderate load. With that in mind, progression through increasing reps is best up until you're able to move a weight for about 15 repetitions. Increasing reps any further than that and intensity is too low to maximize growth. Number 2. More sets. If the goal is to increase total volume, then surely the number of sets we perform are important. In fact, we have evidence showing that multiple sets are associated with 40% greater hypertrophy than one set. That said, if you're someone who's currently training for 1 to 2 sets per exercise, then increasing the number of sets you perform will result in more muscle growth. The reason for the increase in muscle mass is simple. Total volume is increased when we add sets without sacrificing load used or reps performed. Similar to increasing repetitions, however, adding sets also has its limits. A more recent study measured the dose response between 3 training groups, 1 set, 3 sets, and 5 sets. And they concluded that 3 and 5 sets produce significantly greater gains than 1 set, and that 5 sets produce slightly greater gains than 3 sets. So although increasing the number of sets is a viable option, the more sets we add, the less effective it becomes. This is why most programs cap their sets at about 5 per exercise. Anything over that is unnecessary. At this point, you're probably wondering how if we're increasing just the sets, not the reps or the weight, is this making me stronger? The answer is very straightforward. If you can pull 225 pounds for 6 reps on the deadlift for 1 set, but not 2, and you work your way up to being able to perform the same 6 reps on your second set, voila, you've gotten stronger. Number 3. High frequency. Another simple but effective method for adding volume without adding more weight is increased frequency. When volume is equal, training 3 days per week produces greater muscle growth than training once per week. However, since we are discussing progression, the reasoning for including frequency is twofold. First, splitting your volume up into 2 to 3 separate training days will decrease the amount of time you spend training in a fatigue state. Secondly, the neuromuscular adaptations from performing specific movements more frequently will allow you to get better at the lifts faster. The more regularly we perform a lift, the more efficient we become at it. The more efficient we become, the more we can lift, and so on. Before you decide to start bench pressing 5 times per week, though, consider this. A recent meta-analysis concluded that although training a muscle group twice per week is superior to training it once per week, whether training a muscle group 3 times per week is superior to twice per week remains to be determined. What I recommend is simple. If you're hitting a muscle group once per week, start training it twice. If you are training it twice, bump it up to 3 times. Anything higher than that is probably not going to give any added benefit. Number 4. Training density. Training density refers to the total volume completed within a certain time frame. For example, if you perform 5 sets of 10 reps in 30 minutes, your training density for that particular workout would be 50 repetitions. Say you walk into the gym and perform a total of 5 sets on the squat for 10 reps each using 225 pounds, and it takes you 30 minutes to complete. If you can manage to perform the same amount of volume sets times reps times weight in less time, you've progressed. Increasing training density can be done by simply decreasing your rest periods a little more each session. For example, if you're resting for 120 seconds between sets of squats, perhaps knock that down to 110 to 115 seconds next time you're squatting. Number 5. Increase force. Force equals mass times acceleration, mass being the amount of weight used and acceleration referring to the concentric portion of the lift. It's no secret that it takes much more force to push 185 pounds off your chest in 1 second than it does to grind it up for 2 to 3 seconds. Thus, if last week you cranked out 10 reps of 185 pounds on the bench press, but the last representative was a grinder, and this week you moved the same 185 pounds for 10 reps, but the last rep went up with ease, you've gotten stronger once you reach a point in your training where you're no longer able to add weight to the bar week. Focusing on increasing force would be a viable option. Say for example, you managed to hit your prescribed numbers on the bench press, but the last 2 repetitions felt extremely difficult. Next week, instead of increasing the weight, keep it the same until you're able to hit the prescribed numbers with more ease. Number 6. Lifting lighter weight. If the goal is to increase total volume, but adding another 5 to 10 pounds to the bar isn't feasible, then go lighter. Not only will you acquire the adaptations associated with the lighter load, for example hypertrophy, increased lactate threshold and so on, but those adaptations will play a positive role in your heavier load training. I would also add that in most cases, increasing reps will make for an increase in volume even if the intensity and/or the number of sets have been decreased. For example, 225 pounds for 5 sets of 5 equals 5,625 pounds of total volume. 185 pounds for 4 sets of 8 equals 5,920 pounds of total volume, and 135 pounds for 3 sets of 15 comes out to 6,075 pounds of total volume. Number 7. Beyond failure. When's the last time you saw someone performing single arm curls with a 75 lb dumbbell and using good form? I can answer that. Never. Believing that you're not progressing with smaller lifts because your bench has gone up 10 pounds in the last week and you've been stuck curling the same 30 lb dumbbells for the last month is silly. Think about a bench press not only using one of the largest muscle groups in the body, the chest. You've got assistance from the triceps, the shoulders, and if your form is dialed in, the core and some leg drive. Do you think it's fair to compare that with a single joint exercise that targets one of the smallest muscle groups we train directly? This is why when it comes to small isolation lifts, since we're limited to the amount of weight we can increase, adding reps could be our best bet. But if you've been training for long enough, you know that it's easier said than done, especially since there is a cap on how many repetitions we should work up to. This is why I recommend beyond failure training, failure being the point where you cannot complete another repetition with strict form. The beyond failure techniques I'm going to share will allow you to add total volume without increasing weight by pushing beyond the normal limits of muscular failure through extending work sets. Some beyond failure training techniques include cheat reps, partials, drop sets, rest, pause sets, negatives, and force reps. Take note, these techniques should seldom be used. For example, on the last set of your last exercise or small isolation lifts. Conclusion: if you've been training for less than 2 years and you're finding it damn near impossible to add weight to the bar, then you may want to consider the fact that it may be due to your training program, or perhaps even your nutrition. If that's something you've considered, then claim your copy of my free book, Bulk Up Fast, and never second guess your training again. Finally, regardless of the training program you follow, if you want to get bigger, you've got to get better. As long as you're getting better, rest assured that you are on the right track. After all, the best indicator of growth is progress. If you found this video helpful, be sure to click the like button below, subscribe for more videos, and don't forget to turn on post notifications so you don't miss the next one.